think that's recording. Okay. All right. The team, just to go back and reiterate, so Dr. Chitness, who many of you know, is our acting director, and he is the sponsor for this project. I'm Lynn Kadiagala. I am the co-lead and business owner. I'm in the Planning, Accountability, and Reporting Office, which some of you might remember Caitlin Sellers, who used to be in this position. The product owner and project manager is Michael Litwack. We are partners in crime in this endeavor. And then the Booz Allen Hamilton contract support is Aaron Corbett and Craig Kirscher. So you guys will see more of them as we go on. All right. Today we're going to cover, we're going to have an overview. We'll go through the new system.
Lynn, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your slides are not advancing on the screen that you're sharing.
Oh no. Let me stop the share. Try this again. Okay. Do they advance now? Yes, no?
I don't see them.
Not yet.
Getting it.
Ah, there it
That
is.
looks better. Yay.
Does that work? All right. I was just telling Aaron before this, it's amazing that I'm on an IT project because I seem to be IT challenged. All right, so let's go on here. So we'll do an overview, new system, next steps. We'll leave time for questions. And then we have some documents in the appendix. If we have time, we'll go over them. So why does this project exist? As many of you know, we had a panel of experts in 2015. It was comprised of NIFA staff and representatives from the land-grant universities. They came up with some recommendations, 10 to be exact, that NIFA could act upon, that NIFA committed to acting on, and that included an integrated reporting system and a streamlined reporting system to reduce the burden on both the land-grant universities and NIFA staff. So we operated first under a charter. We had an extension working group that followed from that panel of experts. They were disbanded at some point and then reconstituted in February 2020 under the direction of Dr. Scott Angle. So we are running under that charter with a clear mandate to modernize the reporting system and to streamline to reduce the burden. So the vision for this project is building an integrated reporting system using current industry technology that's going to set the stage for a world-class grants management system that will serve not today, but in the future for both you all and for NIFA. The second part of this vision is having that engaged stakeholder community at the table with us from the beginning to the end. So we are in this with you for the long haul, and we are going to expect feedback from you all. So as we put out new versions of this, with every version, we're going to improve the quality of the system so that it works for you all and it works for NIFA. So there's a paradigm that we've developed in this, and it's all based around the critical issues. So when you do your plans, your projects, and your results in the reporting, it's all going to tie back to a critical issue that you all outline in your plans of work. So whether you're on the research side or the extension side, it's going to roll up into a cohesive picture that reflects what you told us you would do in the plan. So your critical issues are really important. And in my comments for the plans of work that I reviewed, you'll see where I talk about how some of these pieces we hopefully will fit together better as we build the structure, the reporting structure in the new system. So Michael, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Lynn. So how will this benefit the partner institutions? Essentially, we are going to consolidate a lot of reporting into one system. So the whole purpose behind this is to reduce duplicative and manual processing of data. So the more that we do that, the more that we can, it's COVID. The more that we do that, the more that we reduce the amount of things that you are entering. So this has been repeatedly asked for at multiple venues in terms of the panel of experts, outreach to you. There's definitely a desire and a mandate to reduce duplicative data and alleviate the burden on you. We now include the extension in the reporting system now includes extension, and we are going to have continuous updates through the year. So I'm going to get into how we're actually able to have those continuous updates, but you are going to be able to see a lot more benefit for the value that we're going to put into this. So we're going to get into technology in terms of how we're going to update more, but this is going to be an ongoing activity that you're going to be able to inform through your reporting. And the system is going to continue to evolve based on the responses we get from you, requirements. This is a living, ongoing system that evolves based on feedback from you. And feedback is an integral part of the process. It's how we design, and it informs everything we do. The end result of all of this, basically the technology implementation that we have, is that the benefits are going to be seen in the customer service. There's going to be higher levels of security that protects data that you report to us, but we're going to spend 90% of our time improving the experience you see instead of a lot more of these internal things that occur on just system management. I will get to this later, but a lot of times with systems, you will see over time that we spend a lot updating and improving the system itself. The customer doesn't see the benefit. That is not going to happen here. You are going to see most of the benefit here. You are not going to see most of our time spent on security and updates of this system because it's going to be done. I'll get to it later.
All right, Aaron.
And so here's the big reveal. For those of you who haven't had a chance to see it, you're starting to see a change in the way NIFA is going to really do everything about this system. It also means we had to sort of start over. So what you're seeing here is a new registration process. Now, what's nice about this new registration process is it's a USDA standard. We will have to do a one-time registration, but it's more secure. And it's something, if you're doing business in any other part of USDA, you'll be able to reuse. It also gives us a little bit more certainty about who our user base is. This also can help, especially when it comes to making sure that users who have left the system long ago will have a lot better way to track that. So you're going to see some of that here. We have guides that will come out about this. We don't maintain this part of the system directly, but that gives us a lot more support when it comes to getting new users set up. So these are just some example screens. Now let me show you the real part of it. Once you get your new eAuth set up, you're going to come into our new portal. So the old NIFA reporting portal over time will melt away, and you'll start seeing new tiles here that will expand over time that support your role. It's designed to be easy to use. It's designed to be flexible, expandable. We've done a lot of testing on this, and we have more to go. But you'll notice that each tile there has an easy way to do the work that you came to do as quickly as possible. And over time, it will evolve to show you the information that's most pertinent and most pressing. So that's the new dashboard. You'll notice that it's very tile oriented. So kind of like your phone or kind of like Windows operating systems, these are going to be something that you can show optimized for your role. And this is the part that we're really excited about because you're starting to see a change where we're focusing on the dashboard. And for those of you who are not able to see this, just let me take a quick pause. We're going to share these slides with you, which will make it easier for you to drill into. And we'll have guides coming out in the coming weeks so you can see it more closely and up front and personal. But again, we're switching over. We're trying to give you dashboards that at a glance will be able to give you a real sense of where you are. So this is the critical issues dashboard. As Lynn was mentioning, this is the new paradigm. Everything in your portfolio of research and extension capacity can be organized underneath these critical issues. And so the critical issues take center stage. They're easy for people to access and view. And as well, they're going to be easy for you to change and update as the situation changes. The other thing that is here and that we'll start building out is as you add programs and projects and then start reporting the results over time, everything will be centralized here. In a way, it's a living, breathing report. So you'll see lots more to come. Initially, of course, it's just a way for you to help organize your critical issues and be able to manage that outside of the one window that we give you now during the plan of work phase. Now you'll have access to this at any time. If you have used REEport in the past to do your research initiation, you probably have seen that there's, dozens of screens that you have to go through to just get basic project data into that. We took a new, more aggressive approach towards streamlining when it came to extension, which we know is a brand new situation for everyone. But we focused hard on trying to make this a light lift to give us some basic information about extension activities that are going on in your state that align with the critical issues. We'll have a list in just a second, but what I want to point out here, I'm showing you two broken up screens, but this will, when you're on the actual application, will be a single scroll on one single page that should be pretty easy to fill in. There's only 3 or 4 fields that you actually have to enter data into. The rest of it will be easy to select, click yes and no, or pick from a drop-down of information of things you are already familiar with. So we will drill into this. Let me use this next table for folks who are asking about this. So what fields are going to be collected? Lynn, on the next slide, I think we have it. So let me just go through here. I think it's around a dozen fields. Most of it's administrative. We're asking you to put in a description, and Lynn's going to talk to that next, called the non-technical summary. But most of the rest of it is just giving us basic information related to these activities. Stuff like, all right, which critical issue is this set of activities going to align under? Which funding source, which is going to be your extension funding in this case? Whether there's an integrated, meaning research and extension together component, whether there's going to be multi-state activities going on as a result of this specific effort, a short title, a date that this is going to start. We like the start date because you can set that in the future. That's often how folks work, right? If you're going to start a new program, you might not start it to the beginning of the fiscal year, so we give you flexibility there. We do want to have a POC, so we've labeled them an initiator. That's just the person who's going to be overseeing this particular effort. Often we're finding, in the way most states will do it, this will be someone who works on the plan of work and deals with extension. So they'll be able to initiate it here, and they'd be named. The non-technical summary, Lynn will touch on. Now, knowledge areas I want to point out. For this first release, we're not including the knowledge area. We may put it back in. We find that this is sort of a new collection for extension, and it may not make as much sense. But if we find, as we work with the research working group to talk more about this information set, we may bring it back in. For now, it's out. Again, we think that it's pretty going to be pretty straightforward, and we're going to continue gathering data. The testing we've done on this, which Michael will cover, helped us shape these fields and shape the way that they are presented to you, and we hope that it's easy to use. So Lynn, I think you wanted to touch on the non-technical summary. Oh, I think you're on mute, Lynn.
Which is good because my dogs just started barking. So I want to say something about the knowledge areas. So we have permission from Dr. Chitness to leave them out for now. We are still trying to understand what our budget office needs. They do collect information and report it up to the budget people on 4-H and one other activity which escapes me. So we might have to put these back in on the reporting, the results side, but for right now, we have permission to leave them out of the initiation. So non-technical summary, for those of you on the research side, this looks very familiar. This is one of those sections in REEport that I would say for us people at NIFA, this is the first place we go to if we're looking for projects in a particular area or we want to know more about what a project is about. You'll read the non-technical summary. It's written in lay terms, so you don't have to be a scientist to understand it. The ones that are written really well are very informative and very useful. We also hear that congressional staff, when they come to REEport or the Data Gateway or CRIS, whichever system they use, this is what they go to read. It's not that we want to add to the burden, but we felt it was such a useful piece of information for NIFA and for the public that we had to have this in. It doesn't have to be long. It covers some basic questions. What is the issue and why is it important? What is the goal of the project or program and objectives? What's the target audience and how do you perceive that they will benefit? And then how are your activities leading to the outcomes that were described in your goal statement or your objective? So oftentimes we get a lot of activities, descriptions of activities in the reports, but not always explanation as to how those activities will cause the outcomes or the changes in behavior or condition that you are seeking. So this is, it sets you up nicely for reporting, and the reporting end of it will be structured in a similar fashion as per the request from the Extension Working Group. So we'll try to keep this structure throughout the system as we build it out. All right.
Good, and to tie it off, so again, this is another example of more of a dashboard feel. So if you want to find out what your extension programs are, you'll have a quick list here that you can see at a glance, all the different programs that have been initiated, and a quick way in, if you're an editor, how to get back to that. We know over time this could turn into quite a long list for some universities. So we're going to provide search features throughout, and you'll see as we evolve the project, as we evolve the functionality, it'll be easy for you to search, easy for you to find, easy for you to drill down. So you may not have to rely as much on those end of year reports that come out. You might be able to get in and grab some of the information you need. And that's something we also know for our internal NIFA folks will be super valuable as well, and should reduce maybe duplicate requests for you to provide information if we're able to more easily get to it. Again, this is simple for this first release, but hopefully you can see the potential as we move along. And again, this is coming back to, so why are we doing initiations, or why are we doing this project or program description? It's an anchor point. It answers the question of how are you going to tackle these critical issues? We also hope that it's something useful for people to reference. And it's a setup for when we eventually move to results, so we can categorize them better under each one of your critical issues.
Michael, do you want to talk about the usability testing?
Sure. All right, so there's a couple things I'll get to in terms of how we've designed this and why we chose these approaches. We chose basically an agile approach with what's called DevSecOps technology. Before I get to that, we have designed everything with the customer at the table. So being at the table means that we have the customer through as much of the process from both design to eventual implementation. We have had 3 usability testing sessions, which were held in the spring of 2020. We interviewed 23 representatives from 20 institutions, and many had 5 or more experience with NIFA systems, and it ran the gambit in terms of what the various skill levels were and aspects of an organization. We have 18 test scenarios. This was accessing the application, adding and editing critical issues, and various aspects of the application. 8 specific improvements have already been implemented based on these testing sessions, and then retested to verify that address the issue. So the technology we're using and the approach, it basically involves you coming to the table, telling us what's wrong, and we are able to implement things much, much faster than ever before. It is a user-centric design, and basically the end result is participants feel the system's clean and intuitive. Here's a couple of quotes. This is much simpler than the system we're currently using, very intuitive. I like the layout of how it looks. I'm very satisfied with what I'm seeing, very easy on the eyes, and it seems intuitive. So we have the current system and the future system. I point out why layout is so important and why that helps inform the process as well. Booz Allen Hamilton has expert usability designers on staff, and we feel it's very important for people to look at what they are designing in the process. So we've had usability experts at every phase of the process, so people can see what they are actually designing.
I don't know if Marianne is on, but if she, just want to say thank you. She did a great job in the usability testing to pick up what people were saying and watching their reactions as they work through the screenshot. So she's very good at what she does. And I was skeptical that the usability testing would really add that much improvement in quality. But there was a dramatic difference between what we first showed them and what we ended up with. So she's been a valuable team member.
So this is an example of streamlining the new system, both in terms of visuals as well in terms of reduction of redundancy. We want you to be able to report only what is necessary, and you can kind of see the before and after. You know, you have this original REEport-based design on your left, and then on the right, you have the new design. So you can see these are the amount of screens you have to go through to do data reported entry to get what the new design does in one screen. Additionally, you can just see how we've had a usability expert on hand. You can see just the clean, very nice interface. We have had a reduction from 10 pages to 1 page, 55 fields to 12 fields. And we've gone, this is less of a design and more of just, you know, internal changes from a 3 approvals to a 1 yearly approval. But it's just a difference. You can very much see much more streamlining going on here. Yeah, Joanne mentions the Streamline Research Report that is going to come, and we're going to do it the same way. But we have a phased approach to our work. This all started with the panel of experts recommendation. Those were 10 actionable items. So we approached it in 3 separate phases. Phase 1 is the plan of work, 2 is initiation, 3 is the results. So we have done all this in concert with the reporting cycle. That's a 5-year period using Agile methodology. And you can kind of see as you see the project evolve over time, we start with the plan of work. We started with this big critical issue bucket. We are now getting into these initiations where we're starting with extension. We're going to move to research, and then we're going to have this results, which is this richer data set because of research and extension. But all this started with a very phased approach. You can see the major features per phase on this page. In phase 1, we have critical issues. This occurred already. It replaced the planned programs. the plans of work were streamlined from 80 plus to an average of 7 pages. Then in phase 2, this is where we're at right now. And this is the retiring the legacy POW. That's done. We are going to have the USDA's EAuth. This is an enterprise-wide level standard for authentication that allows more secure access to our site. We're going to have a new centralized portal, critical issues management, and an extension program. Phase 3 is going to have the results module, progress financial annual reports, and supporting reports. But again, all of this is moving along in phases. And all of it was informed by this massive panel of experts report and the actionable items. And many of those items have not changed. A lot of feedback we talk to that we engage with, it's the same. People want to reduce redundancy. They want to have streamlined reporting. None of those big items have really changed. So here are the next steps. This is what's going to occur next. The research initiation module is going to occur at the research working group. This is September to December 2020. For those that don't already know, we assemble these groups. We engage quite regularly from beginning to end, and that's how we have the customer at the table. We're going to do that for research. We're going to have a results module. This is going to record research and extension outputs and outcomes. Yearly progress reporting requirements research project. And then we have this note, the extension progress only is in the annual report. The AREA annual reporting requirements with blended research extension working group. So that we are going to have this kind of blended working group between research and extension for our annual reporting requirements. And as of note, when I talk about these working groups, we're very, very opposed to kind of closing working groups once we've kind of finished the major task. So if the major task for, let's say, an extension group or a research group is collect this item, we feel that you maybe phase it back while you're frequently meeting with them to design a big item such as the extension program. You're going to interact with them less frequently, but you want a method to constantly engage with them should anything occur, or you want to tweak anything. Okay, hold on 1 second. All right, okay. And then one of the next things is the financial reporting requirements. That is, we will get to that. So there's quite a lot here, but I think the big takeaway is that we want to constantly engage users and make sure that they are at the table.
Right. We have a half hour left. Do you want to talk about methods and then we'll tackle questions?
I can talk about the methodology, sure. Okay, so let's talk about the methodology that we're using and the technology. We have the Agile methodology. In a nutshell, Agile is essentially having people at the table as much as possible from the beginning to the end, then delivering the highest value first. So what happened before in software design, and is still happening, is that you go and sit with people, collect a massive amount of requirements, then you go off, you start designing, maybe you come back a couple of times with some questions, and then you give your finished product to the user 8 months later. In government, who knows? And then the user says, what is this? So essentially, the Agile methodology does not work that way. The Agile methodology is constant engagement. You engage as much as possible. You have as many people who touch the system as possible. You pick broad representation, people who like maybe somebody who just does data entry versus maybe a director. You have representatives from all of these phases of the system at the table. You then take all of these various functions, you pick the highest things first, you just develop the highest things, and you're constantly working on those highest things that are the most important. So we've done the outreach through the extension research working groups. We have these weekly requirements meetings for internal, and then we have monthly meetings with NIFA leadership that we engage up and down the management chain with, and we have the separate IT meetings. This is very government, and like probably most of you don't care. But actually what this means is that we are always engaged. and available to talk and engage, and that's how we get things done. So Agile and DevSecOps are future leaning. So I start to talk about DevSecOps. That is the technology we use. So the second piece of the old software design, in some cases there are justifications for it, in most not. You would go and then you would develop this big system. You would deliver it. A lot of people are kind of unsure of why you did it, and it took 8 months and you weren't quite listening to them. Then you would have this huge component as systems aged of security and then operations. So what would happen is you're constantly patching things, you're constantly updating your software, keeping things up to date. But what winds up happening is the customer needs, which often let's say our reporters in this system, you're not seeing as much benefit. So a massive backlog of items starts occurring because your IT staff is working on security and operations and all these things. DevSecOps builds all of it into the process. So all of these security and updates are occurring behind the scenes every time we release a piece of software. So because we do that, we are putting best value forward for our customers. We are going to be releasing much more rapidly. And then I have at the bottom, time to deliver product is reduced by as much as 80%. So that means you can tell us that you have a big issue with something. We go and start working on it. We can potentially release fixes for those issues in 2 to 3 to 4 weeks. Much, much, much faster. So we have also, this is the DevSecOps pipeline. The technology we wind up using is swappable. So we don't really become dependent on one security item, one operations item. We can swap things out as needed. We don't become dependent over time, and we keep everything up to date. I have this chart at the bottom, which is our pipeline, which you wind up having this design phase and your build phase and your deploy phase and your operate phase. This before, if you can imagine, was one big pie for a piece of software, and you can get stuck at a various phase. Like after you deployed, you can spend all this time in operations. These things are not all part of the process. They're kind of broken out. At this point, we are constantly doing what you see in the chart. So we can talk to you at our design phase as we build, we do all of our operations updating, and we're just constantly going back to this phase. So every 2 weeks, we are always working on something. I say 2 weeks, it can be 4 weeks. My end goal is to be deploying things every 2 weeks, fixes and whatnot. But it's very, very customer focused and customer centric. So we have these before and after slides. I don't know if people have seen these.
Yeah, that's all right.
These are also kind of pretty cool to see. Just you can see the design here. Like if we look at this portal phase, you see the portal on the left over here. If I wanted to go and there's this really little, it looks like a spider chart with these little boxes that are forming this. This design was great 8 years ago. A lot of people were designing that way. This is how we're designing on the right. I should be able to swap technology out and replace that little chart with what you see on the right. I should be able to do it in a matter of weeks, but because of the way things are designed, I can't swap things out like that anymore. What you're looking at the right is completely swappable. If I don't like that critical issue button and I want to change the way it looks, we can do it in literally, I don't know, hours. I don't want to, but you're not talking months. You're talking hours. It evolves over time. And our money is spent on basically delivering to you guys. It's basically, the end user in mind.
Yeah, so if you didn't appreciate the technical review and methodology, direct your questions to Faith Peppers, our new communications director. She thought some of you guys would like to see that and understand more about how we are working through with you all, with the NIFA leadership, NIFA staff. So I hope some of you appreciated that. Okay, so chat box. Where's my chat box? Let me stop sharing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been worse. Okay. Approximately how many extension programs would you imagine the average state entering into the system? I'm guessing something like 5 to 8. All right, so it's going to depend on how broad your critical issues are framed. If you have a critical issue like sustainable agriculture, from what I've been reading, is usually written pretty broadly. You're probably going to want to break that up into a couple of different projects. If you have maybe a nutrition project is scoped more narrowly, that you could just take your critical issue and put it into the program initiation, and that'll work. It depends on how you want to structure your goals and the objectives that are buried in those goal statements. And I also think as you go through this structure, a couple years of reporting in this structure, you're probably going to want to go back and rethink how you write your critical issues. Some states do it like a strategic plan where you have a broader goal statement or a problem statement, and then underneath that problem statement you have 2 to 3 objectives or 2 to 3 angles through which you're going to tackle that issue that's confronting your state. So I would say, like, for most critical issues I've been reading, I would say on average 2 to 3 program initiations at most. But again, it's going to be up to you guys what feels right and how you want to define bundles of activities, which is how I think of a program. So you're going to have to play with it. We'll work with you guys on it. We can have discussions on this forum to see what people are doing. Let's see. Will approval of extension programs be linked to release of capacity funds to universities? Well, right now we do not have approvals built in there. So the release of capacity funds is currently linked to you completing your plan of work and the annual report. The approval of initiations is under discussion at NIFA currently. The next one, if we have only a few critical issues to start with and then decide to expand, will we have to manually update the research projects, extension programs, assignments for that change? So if you have 3 critical issues, so Diane, are you asking if you add a critical issue?
Yes.
So
Can
if
you hear me?
you add a
So
new,
if I start with 5 and I decide I want to expand the critical issues, do I have to go back? And so over the course of the year, when I create a research project, I'm assigning it to a critical issue. When I, create an extension program, I assign it to a critical issue. And I'm thinking more on the research side. Would I have to go back, for current projects that are assigned to a critical issue, and I say I divvy that critical issue up to 2 or 3 other, you know what I mean? Do I have to manually go back and find those projects and recode them?
Not necessarily. So if you have a critical issue and you have a few research projects, a few extension programs attached to that critical issue, then you go and set up another critical issue. I would imagine you're setting up that other critical issue because you have new projects or programs that don't fit with what you already have in terms of critical issues.
Not necessarily. It may just be that I start rethinking, like you said, the more I see of the system, the more I might rethink how we do things. So like if we had one big water initiative, critical issue, and I say, oh, you know, I'm going to divide ag and urban.
Yeah.
You know, would I have to go back to find the research projects that, you know, and have to figure out, okay, should I put them in this bucket or the new bucket? I'm just curious how that's all going to play, and it's probably overthinking how much change that I will generate.
I think if you would decide to do that, it's not going to be that difficult to do, because you're going to go back to your manage critical issues dashboard. You're going to edit that critical issue.
And there is a scenario, and we can, you know, continue to address it. One would be, for example, what if you removed a critical issue, right, that you're no longer working on? What's going to happen to those projects? And I think we're going to have to formally answer that before you get through a full cycle. But for extension, we know they're pretty much long-term. But for research, it could be short-lived, or maybe it runs out of money. So in those cases, you know, we're going to have to probably reconciliation, probably at least yearly. You know, if you're going to add a new critical issue, that'll come up again when you do your POW, refresher every year, your annual submission. You know, so you and the NIFA liaison will be able to kind of review where you're at. And then you'll have the context of all the projects that were under each of those. And I think it's going to be a holistic review. And we might want to put in, you know, some closeout notes. Maybe you say, yeah, well, I switched critical issues, so let me close this project out and here's the new one. Or I split them, you know, one's going to stay alive, but it's going to have a more narrow scope, and here's the new one.
But currently in the system, there's nothing that would prevent somebody from going to their program and changing the critical issue.
Right, and I think for extension, the way we've heard it, there's probably not as many changes going to happen, you know, after we get through the stabilization period. So probably not as much as I could see that in REEport for research, this would have cascading effects, right? Because you'd make a change to an initiation that requires, you know, a review, and then it requires an approval. And then what happens if that's delayed, right? We don't have that complexity right now for extension. And hopefully we won't have to get there, but we will talk to the research working group for how that might be more important to track. But nothing in the system.
Yeah. And Diane, I think it's going to be much easier once we build out more of these features for you to find your water projects. So I don't think it's going to be as laborious as maybe it seems if you were to make that kind of change. Joanne, can you search for a date range? Not currently, but those are features that we can build in down the road. Celeste, we can't see this right now, is that correct? What I mean to say is we can't go in to see the new plan report site right now. No, but we'll share the slides, so you can definitely show them these visualizations. No one can go in until it goes live. The Booz Allen team has a test site where they're working, but the rest of us are closed out until they turn it on. When do you expect that we will begin using this new system for extension? So we are aiming to release this at the end of September. And we think we've gotten past all of these security requirements and asks. So once we go live, you will go for your e-authentication account. Then you will ping your site administrator if you are not one, and they will assign you a role, and then you will be allowed into the system. And we will have guides up on the website. So once you have a role and once you have your e-authentication account and you've verified your identity, you will go to the plan of work, REEport, integration website. We will have a button there that you click, and that will take you to the login page, which you then, once you log in, that will take you to the application. Do you have any educated guesses or assumptions about how this will affect extension reporting for 2020? So there's a, oh gosh, there's a strong possibility that we will have to use Confluence again to collect the annual reports. We are not sure that we will get the actual report structure built, because there's at least two pieces the way Aaron explains it to me. So I think we'll probably be doing one more year of manually processing the annual report and the OGFM supplemental. I was hoping it wasn't going to be that way, but we lost some time with contract onboarding, and we're a little behind from where we wanted to be. Okay, do we want to go back to the initiation? Aaron, do you still want me to go back?
If we're done with questions, sure. I think let's try to get to the questions, just because we're going to share this with folks. That's going to be the easiest way for you to see it. And we also want to encourage you to gravitate towards the final guides that we'll send out in the coming weeks, because that will be a little bit more user-friendly to seeing, you know, exactly what's going to be there. So we're giving you a look at a couple of, like on the new portal, you won't have all the tiles that you see there. They're examples, but you will have in your guide exactly what's going to be there. But I know, like Celeste is asking and others, you can certainly use all the material here.
So Shannon's asking, can you share what you're looking for in the description of the critical issues and the character limit word count?
Well, I can answer the second part if you want to handle the first, Lynn. Right now, we're staying with 1750 as the description limit for character count, which is, I forget, something around 200 words maybe. That's gonna remain unchanged from what it is in the plan of work right now. But there's also possibility that we could expand that if, you know, Lynn or others wanted to increase that. I know the intent was always to try to keep it concise, and so the only way over time we've learned to do that is to try to limit the character space.
So one of the things I'm seeing in the plans of work that I read was a lot of description on the critical issues is put in the executive summary, and then the critical issues section is exceedingly short. And I don't know if that's a character limit, Aaron, but in my comments to one of the states last night, I said that would have been nice to have it all together. They just had these very beautiful descriptions of what they were going to do and why, and then down in the critical issue area, they had their objective statements. So it's sort of like you're splitting your goals from your objectives, and it space limitation, or maybe the way they wanted to write their executive summary. I don't know. A lot of my comments back to people are, we need to think about best practices and then fold those best practices into much better guidance for what NIFA really wants to see in these reports. Because the plans are all over the place in terms of how people approach them. And it's not that people did them right or wrong. It's just, I can see where people kind of struggle with, well, what do they really want in that executive summary? So my takeaway from reading a lot of them is that we need to think more clearly about what we want from the NIFA perspective, and then articulate some clear guidance.
Well, and my plug is, this is the beauty of the way we're doing this, is that we want to learn from where we are and have the flexibility to change our mind, improve. And so, look, we want to expand critical issues. I don't think we're going to do it right now, but we can certainly do that. We have plans, in fact, as we roll the plan. So one of the things we should answer here is, what about the plan of work? And that, where the executive summary, the merit review, the stakeholder questions are. What about that thing? Well, that thing's going to stay sort of where it is for the moment, but eventually we're going to move it under this new umbrella where it'll be in lockstep with the critical issues, and we'll have an opportunity there to take a closer look. So if we say, hey, let's give up some executive summary space and have that flow into critical issues, that would be the good time to do it.
So I think that's why I was asking my question right there, is I was wondering, there's all that stuff that goes in the plan of work. Are you expecting some of that to end up in the critical issues? So we talk about the critical issue and stakeholder input there, or will we still have all that merit review, executive summary, stakeholder input? So I was thinking maybe you were going to put that in the description of the critical issues. Then I heard Lynn talk about goal statement, objective statements. I don't see those built out. And so a lot of us are getting ready to prep our faculty for reporting their plan of work. And so I wasn't sure what we really should be collecting, and is that going to end up in the description of the critical issue? I didn't know. So that's what I'm looking for in that question. What do we do with our plan of work? Because we're all kind of getting our faculty, ready, and our systems ready for that, I assume.
So to me, the plan of work is like a strategic plan. There are a couple models that emerged in reading these. Probably the most dominant model is where you talk about the conditions in the state, the challenges that you are going to address. So there's a link between your executive summary and your critical issues. Or you could do it more like a strategic plan. So you're laying out your big high-level goals in your executive summary, and then in your critical issues, you're telling us in a little more detail how you're going to address those critical issues. And both of those ways work as a reader. The one that talks about the conditions usually allows people to put a little more data in. So if they're talking about food shortages or obesity or agricultural challenges, those narratives usually have some baseline data. And so it's very clear that you're setting yourself up to initiate specific research or extension projects. And then you're going to be measuring, I'm putting that in quotes, against that baseline that you laid out in your plan of work. So there's several different ways to do it. We're not looking for a full-fledged, here's what we're going to do, here are the activities, because obviously that goes in the initiation. That's where you have a chance to tell us how you're going to play out those critical issues and address those problems. The stakeholder input and the merit peer review are going to stay in the plan. I'm confident that I will get permission to leave those out of the reporting side. You will do them once, and you will not do them a second time until things change. So that we'll keep that in the plan of work. But it's, what do you put in your executive summary and what do you put in the critical issues? I see that just these different approaches to it. But Shannon, that's something I think that we should have a discussion about in the extension working group, come up with some ideas and then float them to this group. Because I just get the sense that people really don't know how to approach that. And I think if we come up with some various models and lay down some guidance, I think it would be a lot more efficient for everyone. Shannon, did you want to say something?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Christian, can you say a bit more about how program initiations relate to ongoing programs? If we run a literacy program for incarcerated parents that is ongoing for several years, do we initiate it in terms of reporting with a start date? Should we report on it several years in a row? So this is the other beauty of this system is, as you can see on this Manage Critical Issues page, there's a highlights column and there's a results column. So if you have an ongoing program, an extension, you may not want to give us a full-fledged report in the final report, but you want to highlight things that you're achieving along the way. So you're gonna have to initiate it in the new system just to get it in the record. But then you will have the flexibility of how you want to report it to NIFA. We are going to eventually close down all those extra data collections that we have done through the communications office, because what we want them to be able to do is come to this system to be able to see, oh, University of Wisconsin has put in a highlight on this project. Let me go in and see what they've done. Is it appropriate for putting it into one of our communication vehicles? So they will come here and you won't have to double report to this system and to share your science. They will come here and help advertise the work that you all are doing. When we describe an integrated project, will we be required to attach the extension program and impact directly to a specific research project that is in the system? Or will we be able to simply identify a project as integrated because researchers and extension have worked together? So I think the guidance on integrated has been pretty flexible to date. There is language that we will have in there. I don't think we'll have the pop-ups in the first iteration, but we did work on language regarding what constitutes an integrated project with the extension working group. And I'm trying to think of what it was. You have to plan together, and I think you have to report together. There were several components that makes it an integrated project. So in the initiation, you just merely have to tell us that it's going to have an integrated component or a multi-state component. And we are doing this, A, because the legislation requires us to ask you to report that. And B, we are trying to position ourselves so that we can eliminate the OGFM supplemental as an independent form. We promised you all an integrated system, and that's what we are striving for. So we don't want all these additional submissions that you have to do. If you have to provide us with financial data, we are going to work very hard that we ask for it from you once. And then we use the technology to make the connections to the other pieces of information that it connects to. So in this first phase, you just have to tell us whether it has one of those components and explain what makes it an integrated or a multi-state. And then we will provide the definitions for those two terms in the system eventually. Will there still be quantitative reporting, i.e. numbers for outputs? Yes, so this was a bit controversial. It was my decision to leave the outputs and outcomes out of the planning phase. I felt that they were not that useful to NIFA to put the burden on you all. This is, again, something that we can change down the road if my approach doesn't work for you all or doesn't work for NIFA. That's a pretty easy change. But yes, in the reporting phase, we will give you space for quantitative reporting, outputs, outcomes, participants. The other thing we're going to do is collaborate with our new Civil Rights Director, who was on one of these meetings. And we are going to try to build in the civil rights demographic data requests into this system. It's probably something that we'll do once we get out of REEport. That's our first priority, but that is on our list of things that we would like to incorporate into this system. Will data flow directly to the plan of work, or will we be able to export to Excel as now? Erin, do you want to address that?
So we're not going to have exports in the initial release, but we are looking to make it possible for you to get data out of the system. So I think that's the best answer I can give at the moment. But we hope that the system is also easy for you to copy and paste out things, you know, on a one-off basis. But we know that you'd love to have Excels or cross matches. So we're working that page we show with the projects and programs. We have a concept where you could have a little bit more of a search across the application. Again, we want to release these features as they make sense. Right now, there won't be a lot of data in the system. So we obviously, as we get more of the pieces in place and ideas of reports and exports, as they get finalized, we'll start building them into the system.
And I think somebody asked an earlier question about how will we know what's expected on the reporting side. For right now, assume that what we asked for in the last year's annual report is what we are moving forward on. Again, we want to keep the reporting streamlined. We are not going to ask from you things that NIFA does not need for legal purposes or other informational purposes. So that, I felt like what we had for the annual report last year really covered a lot of things, minus the boxes for the quantitative indicators, which we will have in the final system. But basically in the annual report, we're going to be asking you again to tell us, what did you actually do? What did you accomplish? Who benefited? How much did they benefit if you have that data? So pretty much what was laid out last year in the annual report is what we will begin with when we start designing that.
And I may, sorry, just to jump real quick back into that, I may have missed that. So in terms of the plan of work form, where we have the executive summary and those things, expect that data will get migrated over to this new system as we come back to making that move.
So expectations, so once the system goes live, if you all have extension programs that are clearly delineated, you can go ahead and do a program initiation. So 4-H would be a logical thing that you might want to put in there. Put in the basics, and then you have it to expand on at a later date. we will then be adding research. So when you go to start putting the report together, you will have some of your new, well, let me think, so if we're in September, we're building September to December. No, there's not going to be a lot of data in there. Once we build the research initiation, they'll put in their new projects, research projects. So there won't be a lot in there. Anyway, Norma, that's a good question. And as we think through and watch how you all engage the system and engage the researchers, we will have more of these conversations on this, these webinars, and we can clarify our expectations more as we go through it. It's one of the challenges of building this iteratively and releasing it iteratively. You try to think 5 steps down the road, but sometimes it's not always possible. But we would like to see you all start putting your programs in here. And then as we build out these other modules, you will be positioned then to have the system be able to roll everything up. So eventually you'll have your research projects and your extension programs, and then the technology will actually create the annual report for you. The space limitation for critical issues made it very difficult, I think she meant difficult to describe different activities. Yeah, that was my suspicion. It was a space limitation. Yes, I'd love to see an example guidance of what the ideal POW would look like for NIFA. Christian says, does that mean the system is being built out to be a complete programmatic inventory? Yes, so everything will be in here: competitive, capacity, ARERA, non-ARERA capacity. So I don't know about FNet because they collect their data through a survey tool. So I'm not sure if they put anything into REEport right now. I think they're on their own system. But as much of NIFA supported, NIFA funded projects and programs, they will be built into this system.
Lynn, sorry, but my question was kind of more around really the scope of the definitional scope of a program. So you mentioned earlier the 4H as an example. So would 4H be the level of program that we would initiate, or would be the 4H Tech Changemakers program within 4H the type of program we initiate? That's kind of unclear, I think, to me at this point yet, like what the scope of a program is in terms of like the granularity that you expect.
So would you report those two pieces together, or would you want to report them separately?
I think in the past, the way we've done it is that we would focus on specific small P programs within our big P program efforts and report then these small P programs that fall under the larger educational priorities. So that middle ground of the big P program, like 4H, for example, or crops and soils, would not be the granularity on which we would report. We would report on specific things that would happen in crops and soils and highlight some of the major efforts in it, but we would not specifically report against crops and soils, report against 4H. We would do this on the small P programmatic level. And that's kind of an open question to me right now, what what you are expecting in terms of that.
To me, I would expect you to, well, I could see it working both ways. I could see you having one program called 4-H, and then you would be able to report those different activities under that. Or you could separate out your larger chunks. So if you had a robotics program for 4-H that was quite significant, and then you had some other programs under there, maybe you want to initiate those independently. But I think at the end of the day, what is the goal that you're trying to achieve? And how did those activities contribute to that goal? So if you had a broader statement for 4-H, I could see that your program encompassing all of those. I think it's going to be easier to answer when we see what the wireframes look like for the results section. We have our image right now based on the plan of work and REEport. I honestly don't have my head around that quite yet, how that's going to look, given the things that this technology can do for us. Aaron, you've thought about this a lot more than I have. Do you want to talk about what your vision is?
Well, I mean, at the end of a report, progress or annual, we really care about high quality descriptions of the outcome, outputs, maybe even impacts of any of the activities, whether they be research or extension. So we want to try to design something that's easy to get data into, that tells that qualitative story, also pays homage to things in research that are important. I mean, there are journal articles sometimes that are important, patents and those kinds of things. So we want that data to get front and center in the new system. The report just chronicles those things. So the format that takes might be less important than getting high quality data in there. And so the point of getting extension in place right now is to give us an understanding of how each institution wants to bound that program. So later when they give us explanations of the outcomes of the results, it makes some sense. But we may learn some things as we go along. So to me, it would be set up a structure that becomes the boundary of the program. And the next thing we'll do is have a module where you can tell us what the results of those activities are.
Thanks, Aaron.
I'm thinking in terms of my work with the Master Gardener State Coordinators. So they have an overall mission of educating the public on horticultural and landscaping practices. But underneath that, they have certain areas that they work in. Food security, pollinators. They've got 3 to 4 themes. So I could see them having one program, but maybe we end up structuring the application so that in their highlights, they're highlighting each of those themes. And then maybe that carries through into the final report. Or maybe they don't want to report on pollinators, but they want to keep the record in the system updated on what they're actually doing, even though they may not have results to report when it comes time to put the annual report together.
Lynn, this is Meredith. That brings me kind of to a point for us because we have agriculture as like our critical issue. So Master Gardeners brings us down 3 levels almost to me. So I'm thinking about agriculture as kind of our critical issues. But then from agriculture, I would have to break it down into plant and animal. But then from plant, I would break it down into consumer horticulture and, you know, commercial horticulture. And then under consumer horticulture, that's where you would eventually find your master gardeners. So chances are, unless you really broke it down pretty far as your programs, you wouldn't even get to master gardeners as a program unless you listed, you know, probably, you know, we probably would have to list 20 different programs or more under agriculture to get to the level of a master gardener. You know, because I was thinking about that with 4-H even, you know, thinking about healthy living, talking about science, or preparing for careers and civic engagement and stuff like that, that if you don't capture each of those things, when you write up the statements and you pick your outcomes, you may miss a lot of these things because you're going to try to pick those big hot topics, the best things, the biggest numbers, and you might miss some of them. I mean, master gardeners would make it up to the top because they have big numbers, but we may have a lot of programs, you know, some of our turf programs, some of these things that you might miss if you didn't bring it down to that program level where you have a large number of programs. So I don't know. I mean, I was thinking of initiating many more programs than 2 to 3 per critical issue, just to get down to some of these larger programs like Master Gardener, like our turf programs, stuff like that, that I don't know how else you're going to do it. The youth livestock programs, stuff like that, how that wouldn't get kind of watered down into everything else. Open for ideas, but that's just kind of my thought.
Well, so what we've been trying to do in principle is design the system in response to feedback like this in a way that accommodates the different needs. So when we get to designing the results section, this is exactly the kind of feedback that we will be looking for. What are those examples of how you get from a critical issue to a unit, a chunk, for lack of a better word, that you would want to report against? So, you know, maybe you want to have a youth program that you initiate, and then under that, you pull in your 4-H or your Master Gardener school programs. So they're all, you're showing how they're all contributing to what your goals are in the area of youth. So we will try to build a system that allows you to slice and dice in different ways that meets how you all see what you're doing, what relates to what. So you're going to have to do some disaggregation, and then the report will help you aggregate it back up to accomplishments against your critical issues.
I think the question is really, where do you want the completeness of the programmatic inventory, on what level, right? So we could, for example, say we're breaking down our critical issues into 12 different major streams, and those are our programs. And within those programs, we're gonna give you some slices, some bests off, some like indications of how this works, some examples of small P programs. So that would be a complete inventory. Or we could say, well, we do a programmatic inventory on the level of Master Gardener, which could give us maybe 30 to 40 programs that we then need to report against, or even to indicate if we want to provide you a complete inventory. Or we go deeper down in the small P program. And I think the question really is, I think it would be helpful if there would be some kind of indication of what would be most helpful to you, so that because I think this kind of flexibility could bring as a negative point also this kind of maybe unintended consequence of pressure of like, oh, well, we have over 100 small P programs. Are we now supposed to report against all of them? And you could be in a situation then where you have all of a sudden hundreds of programs being initiated, which would, I think, from the philosophy that you've been showing, would be kind of contrary to the kind of like tightened up format that you're trying to build. I'm just reflecting over that confusion around this, could come from flexibility as a kind of a negative side?
At the end of the day, in your critical issues, you're laying out issues that are really important to your state. They are issues that you commit to using NIFA funds to address. And at the end of the day, from the NIFA perspective, what we want to know is, how did you use our funds to help mitigate those issues? So I wouldn't imagine that you're going to report everything, because then we're back to a 200-page report that's burdensome for you all to write and time-consuming for NIFA staff to read. So you're going to want to keep it at a level where it's manageable. So maybe you have a program called Consumer Horticulture, and you're aggregating your various activities under that. If there's more than the master gardeners working in that space, you would use in the annual report, here's how these different activities contributed to that goal of whatever, however you describe consumer horticulture. So you're going to have to figure out, how much do you want to break it down without it getting to be unmanageable? And we will definitely work on trying to clarify what we want. But I think at the end of the day, all of us want to be able to go to the Hill and say, here's why extension matters, and here's why Congress should continue funding it, because here are the different issues that it helps the state address and improve the lives of the people who live there. So it'll be an ongoing discussion for sure. And these kinds of examples are very helpful. Aaron, you look like you're about to say something.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that the questions are pretty consistent. People wanting to do the right thing and, you know, try to share as much as they can about what they've accomplished and satisfy NIFA's needs. And I think that's very good. I think the other side of it is that we might not do it how we eventually, you know, want to have it. So in other words, there may be a period here where maybe you go too granular and decide that's just too much detail and it's really not self-sustaining. Or you might be too high, too high level, and there's really not a cohesive, strong statement about what was accomplished without more direct examples. So I think that we're looking for feedback and want to continue sharing. I think that's the period we're entering right now. We want people to get into the system, start using it to describe their extension programs, start figuring out what level is right for them, start thinking about where do you want to be able to tell that story. I was just reading what I think it was Beth was writing here. I think that probably is pretty close to the kind of thing we're looking for you all to define for your institutions, for your state. You know, find a way to tell that story in a compelling way, show evidence of it through the results. And if getting caught up in being too granular is getting in the way of that, we want feedback here to this kind of forums so that we make sure the system, you know, isn't asking for too much. But if the system also doesn't support some more complexity that you're looking for, we might need to bring that back too. We've cut a lot back, and we realize by going back to the basics, it's making people rethink their assumptions. That's a good thing. And I think NIFA is offering flexibility as we move forward in this period.
I just want to get some of these specific questions. So we are not going to have common measures for everyone. We will, patents, publications, indirect, direct contacts, volunteers. These are ongoing debates at NIFA. That's why I'm hesitating. So patents, we have the iEdison database. I'm not clear why we ask for patents again in the reports when they are legally required to be in iEdison. Publications, I would really like to find a way of gathering that information without having to ask it from the universities. I'm in discussions with some of our colleagues at other bureaus within USDA. The National Ag Library is working on a methodology. We have some ideas as well, but we don't have anything in place yet. Indirect and direct contacts, I think what we will do is give you space to report the number of participants at the program level, program project level, but I do not think we're going to ask for indirect and direct contacts in the manner that we have in the past. I don't think it's a widely used data point at NIFA. That still needs to be confirmed across the entire agency, but when I queried people last year, I got some looks like, why do we ask for that? So, and volunteers, probably not. We will probably give you a generic space where you can report the things that are relevant to your projects. So like Master Gardeners, if you were going to report on them, they have an impressive number of direct contacts and they track all that very well. So again, these are things that we have to discuss with the Extension Working Group and the Research Working Group. And then as we formulate some tentative conclusions, we will bring them back to this group and get your feedback. But we are going to try to not ask you for things that we don't use. That is one of the core principles that we're working around. It has to be legally required, or it has to be something that we use for other purposes like budget justifications. Did I hit the highlights here?
I think so, Lynn. I'm just going to recommend this if you're okay with it. I mean, we've gotten great feedback. There's more to come. This is just the first webinar that we're going to have. I think we're going to have at least one more for a broader audience. You'll also start seeing FAQs, which actually these chats I think will be very helpful. It sounds like, you know, some examples and setting up expectations would be very helpful. So I think Lynn can work on with Faith to try to make sure that that's driven home in the communications going out to folks, especially around when do we expect to have these initiations in the system. I mean, we hope you use it right away. We hope that you get in there and you start looking at your critical issues and saying, oh, I know how this comes together. However, that may not be your final answer. And I think it's important to note whether or not this has a funding implication. And we are in touch with OGFM on that. But I was just going to say, like, I think there's great questions, but I'd say we wrap it up. Take some of these questions as overflow for our next webinar or weaving it into the communications.
Yep. Yeah, no, just on a concluding note, Norma says, I hope you understand the fear surrounding adding program initiations before we know how to report against those. Yes, there is some reverse engineering that we had hoped to be able to do. As a program evaluator, I always like to start at the end. We have put the Extension Working Group on pause, but they know that we still need them, and this may be something that we pull them back in and we start designing that report. We can do that in parallel to dealing with the research initiation. We won't have use of the Booz Allen team to do wireframes and do the design functions, but we can certainly have those discussions and get started on that. We definitely understand the fear that we invoke in the system when we start messing with reporting. So you know, we will answer your questions and listen to your concerns and certainly try to address them through the streamlining effort, through the functions the technology gives us to play with, which is much greater in scope than we had with REEport or Plan of Work. So you can't play Ashwani with the dashboard until it goes live, so put that on your calendar for October. All right, we have a meeting with our communications staff, and so I think we need to scoot as much as we'd like to stay and answer more of these questions or respond to comments, but I will save the chat box, and we will schedule something soon. So look in your email for something for me in the next, let's say we'll communicate something out in a week to 10 days. I'm taking a couple days off. I'm gonna take the rest of this week off. So POW meeting next Wednesday. Oh, Shelley's on top of her calendar. So Shelley, we will consult our calendars and what is next on our agenda, and you can look forward to hearing from one of us. All right, thanks guys. Thanks for your patience, and we will be in touch.
Yeah, get excited. On the corner.
Thank you all.
Let me see.